Hello, government students. Today we're starting our last unit this semester in our government class. And interestingly, this is the last social studies unit of your entire school career, not counting college, of course. So that's exciting. Let's get started. Here you see in this picture the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C., located a couple of blocks behind the U.S. Capitol building. If you're ever in Washington, D.C., you ought to stop by and take a peek at this building. And it's a little bit off the beaten track. You have to kind of be looking for it to find it, but definitely worth seeing. Sometimes you'll see demonstrations out in front of this building where people are exercising their First Amendment rights to assembly and free speech. Always kind of interesting to see. Okay, but let's get to it. The judicial branch is discussed in, in Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution. Article 3 is the shortest of the three articles dealing with the three branches of government. And Article 3 only concerns itself with creating the Supreme Court. All inferior courts are created by Congress, and Congress has that power through Article 1, Section 8. So Article 3 creates the Supreme Court. And then we have in the federal judiciary 97 district courts, which are the courts of original jurisdiction or general trial courts. Remember, a general trial court is where you have the prosecutors and you have the defense and you have witnesses called and you have a jury. Those are general trial courts, and at the federal level they are called district courts. We also have 11 U.S. Circuit Courts of Appeals. Those are our appellate courts. Don't let this word circuit confuse you. At the state court level, a circuit court is the general trial court or the court of original jurisdiction. But at the federal level, the circuit courts are appellate courts. So that terminology might get confusing. And then, of course, we have the Supreme Court. Now, Supreme Court justices decide cases based on the Constitution, not on their personal opinion. That's an important factor to remember. And justices don't decide guilt or innocence. Once we get to the Supreme Court or even the Circuit Court of Appeal level, the judges and justices will only decide whether or not the Constitution and law were properly honored, whether or not that defendant's rights were properly respected. They do not concern themselves with guilt or innocence. That happens at the district court level. Once it gets to appellate courts or the Supreme Court, we're only ensuring that the law was properly followed. Okay, let's look at the term of office for a federal judge. Federal judges may serve as long as they practice good behavior. Good behavior in parentheses, in quotation marks, means that this is language directly from the Constitution, and that means that a judge at the federal level has a lifetime appointment or may serve as long as he wishes to. He cannot be removed except through impeachment, death, or resignation/retirement. That is, the president appoints the judge to the federal bench. That judge is confirmed by the Senate or approved by the Senate. That after that, they are there as long as they want to be or until they die or are impeached. Impeachment, by the way, does happen occasionally, not often, but it has happened. We've had one Supreme Court justice impeached. He was not convicted, but he was impeached. He got to stay on the bench, though, because he did not get convicted in his impeachment. But we have had lower level federal judges impeached and convicted, so it has happened a few times. So what are the qualifications in the Constitution to be a federal judge? Remember, the president, for example, must be 35 years old. He must be a natural-born U.S. citizen. He must have lived in the United States for 14 years. For a federal judge, his qualifications, there are none. There are no qualifications listed in the Constitution to be a judge at the federal level. The Chief Justice of the United States of America doesn't even have to have a law degree. There are no qualifications at all. Now, you have to be confirmed by the Senate. Would the Senate confirm a federal judge who had no law degree? Probably not. But it would be possible, and there have been judges in the past who did not have law degrees. So it is a possibility. Not likely, but a possibility. Here's their salaries. The Chief Justice makes $267,000 a year. That's him, by the way, John Roberts. That's a pretty hefty salary. That is more than what the President pro tempore of the Senate makes. It is more than what the Speaker of the House makes. So it's a very prestigious job, paid well. In fact, even the lower federal judges make more money than members of the House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate, unless we're talking about the very top leadership in the House and the Senate. Other than the very top leaders, though, in the legislative branch, judges in the judicial branch make more money than people in the legislative branch. Okay, let's look at who sits on the court. Here's our Republican appointees. There are 9 justices on the Supreme Court. 6 of them were appointed by Republicans, 3 of them by Donald Trump. In just 4 years as president, Trump got 3 justices on the Supreme Court. George W. Bush only got 1. George W. Bush got 2 because of Chief Justice Roberts. But yeah, 2 for an 8-year term in the presidency. Trump serves 4, he gets 3. So good job for Trump, I guess. Luck favored him. It also helped that Trump had a Senate majority who was Republican. There was a justice who had been appointed in the last year of Obama's term, but the Senate refused to confirm that justice. They didn't even allow that justice to have a hearing. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell wanted to wait until the election to see if he could get a Republican appointee on the court. Well, he did. Trump won that presidential election, and Trump very quickly appointed Neil Gorsuch, and the Senate very quickly confirmed him to the position. Here's our Democratic appointees. There's only 3 of them. And you see here our most recent appointee is Justice Ketanji Jackson Brown. She was confirmed in the spring of 2022. And she just assumed her position on the Supreme Court, I believe, at the end of April of 2022. So she is our newest justice on the Supreme Court. She replaces Justice Stephen Breyer, who was appointed by Clinton and retired after about 25 years on the court. He retired in the spring of 2022. I get a kick out of this little cartoon. We do have a lot of ethnic, racial, and gender diversity on the court. What we do not have is much diversity in educational background. Every justice on the Supreme Court when Obama was president got the law degree either from Harvard or Yale. And that has been true for some time, going back into the 80s, pretty much. And it's still true today, with one exception. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, Trump's last appointee, got her law degree from Notre Dame. But otherwise, every single justice on the Supreme Court, including the most recent one, Justice Jackson Brown, has a degree from either Harvard or Yale. I think that's unfortunate. We have great law schools in our country. You don't have to be from Harvard or Yale to be an outstanding jurist, an outstanding judge. However, for whatever reason, they're always going Harvard and Yale these days. Okay, let's go on. Here's the political spectrum of the current Supreme Court. Notice that it's tending very much to the right. We have probably the most conservative Supreme Court in my lifetime. It's gotten far more conservative with 6 justices appointed by relatively conservative Republican presidents. Only 3 have been appointed by Democrats. Notice I have our most recent justice in red with a question mark. She's not been on the court long enough to really peg her on the political spectrum, but I would guess that she's going to be comparable to the other Democratic appointees. What's interesting is that the closest thing we have to a centrist moderate on the court right now is the Chief Justice, Justice Roberts. And he seems to have been moving more and more to the left, more and more to the middle. Roberts used to be much further to the right than he is today in more recent decisions. And I think that's really because he's trying to balance out the court a little bit. And as the court has become more conservative, I believe Justice Roberts is trying to make a conscious effort to look at all interpretations, potential interpretations, and is moving a little bit more liberal. He's not liberal by any means. He's still quite conservative, but he's much he seems to be less conservative than he used to be. Let's put it that way. Okay, let's talk about types of law. This will be a little bit of a review for you. We talked about this when we looked at the Judicial Branch of Illinois. We have civil law, which decides disputes between private citizens or corporations where no law has been broken. This would be an instance where someone claims to have been harmed by the actions or negligence of someone else, but no law was broken. But that would be civil law. We also have criminal law, which deals with crimes. A crime has been committed, and we need to determine guilt or innocence of that crime and provide for the punishment of that crime. And we have constitutional law, which relates to the interpretation of the Constitution, and that's really what the Supreme Court's all about. They're about constitutional law. So those are our three primary types of law. Let's look at how the court makes a decision. You must have a majority of 5 justices. Remember, we have 9 justices on the Supreme Court. If there is no majority, the previous court's decision would stand, and that would likely be a Circuit Court of Appeals. That decision would stand. So, for example, if there is one of the 9 Supreme Court justices who, for whatever reason, does not vote on a case, you could potentially have a 4-4 tie. And if that were to happen, then the previous court decision would stand. And that does happen occasionally. We've had situations where a justice chooses not to hear a case. Decisions don't have to be made immediately. Sometimes they may take many months. In fact, usually they take many months, and sometimes nearly a year before the decision is announced. So that's because typically justices will kind of negotiate among themselves or argue among themselves after the case has been heard. And then it takes some time to come to the conclusion that they reach. So it could take quite a while. Once a decision has been reached, they must write a written majority opinion. Okay, that is a requirement. There has to be a written majority opinion. So make sure you see that underlined word. You want to make note of that. And the reason you want to have that written majority opinion is because majority opinions will be used by other courts as law. That is, other courts in a similar case will look at what the Supreme Court decided in the past, and they will decide their case based on previous majority opinions of the Supreme Court. And when a court uses an earlier case of the Supreme Court to help it rule, that's called precedent. Precedent is using earlier Supreme Court rulings as law. Justices who disagree with the majority opinion will explain their reasoning for the disagreement, and that's called a dissenting opinion, and that is also important. Sometimes later on, it will become apparent that those who dissented probably had the better argument, and a precedent may be overturned using the dissenting opinion on a future court case. Okay, another term I want you to know is recusal, where a justice believes that he or she cannot give an unbiased opinion of the case. That justice may decide, in fact should decide, not to take part in the trial. That's called recusal. The justice recuses himself. This is Justice Rehnquist, who was appointed by President Nixon. When Nixon had to go to court during the Watergate scandal, Rehnquist famously recused himself because he was a friend of President Nixon. He did the right thing. Landmark case is another term I want you to know. A landmark case is a case which establishes a new precedent for the interpretation of law. So a previous precedent might be overturned. A new precedent is established. That will make that case that establishes the new precedent is called a landmark case. Let's take a look at some landmark cases. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, Marbury versus Madison, a famous landmark case, established the right of judicial review, where the court is able to overturn a law that's passed by Congress. A bunch of other landmark cases here. You are going to get a handout with these cases on them, and your job between now and the end of the, or between now and the Constitution test, is to figure out what these landmark cases were about. So you will get a handout, and this will also be, the handout will also be on Canvas for you to do a little bit of research. I'm going to give you 2 of these landmark cases. The first 2, Gideon versus Wainwright, I don't want you to spend time on because we're going to cover this case in detail, the very last thing we do this semester. And some of these you should already know. Citizens United dealt with campaign finance. You should already know Westbury versus Sanders, dealing with the congressional districts and population. The others you should find out on your own. And with that, we're going to stop this presentation. Have a great day.